The Indianapolis Colts got some major injury news on Wednesday, including Josh Downs potentially being back and one of their starters on the offensive line potentially out the rest of the season. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And you guys can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd over at HorseshoeHuddle.com. And my partner, Jake Arthur, is our credentialed Crocs on the ground for the site as well. We have a fun show for you guys planned today. We're going to talk about some storylines going into this Broncos game, some potential matchups the Colts can exploit or matchups they need to overcome. But first, we have some major injury news. We're going to talk about the ramifications of these injury news updates here on Wednesday. But first, let's kick it off with the actual storylines and what happened in these injury updates that Shane Steichen gave us today, Jake. So this is our first time getting injury news on basically anybody in a little over a week with the bye week. The Colts were away from the facility. You guys were away from the facility. And we got plenty of updates on players who are on IR, guys who are dealing with injury, and guys who might be away from the team indefinitely the rest of the season. So to start off, Ryan Kelly, starting center, veteran center, one of the oldest players on the Colts team, who was on IR, has been designated to return. He was a limited practice today in the Colts' first practice since the bye week. Jaylon Carlies, the rookie linebacker who was placed on IR early in the season, he was a full practice today. And then Josh Downs, who missed this past game, luckily had that bye week to recover. He was a limited practice today as well. So 3 players right there, Jake. It looks like the Colts have a good chance of getting all 3 of them back for this upcoming game against the Denver Broncos. And that's a huge sign for this Colts team.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I did not expect to get this much injury news. I knew we'd have guys to ask about, guys who'd been banged up. We obviously knew Ryan Kelly was eligible to return. But no, Kelly getting a limited session. Shane did say we'll see on these guys. I don't think there's any huge rush for them, but having the bye week did give them an extra week. And this is kind of a do or die game on Sunday. So they may play down the urgency, but they say they do understand, from all of us, why this is obviously circled in big red Sharpie. So might some of these guys, push through things a little bit to make sure that they're available for this game, perhaps. But Downs, Kelly, Jaylon Carlies. Carlies is the perfect complement to what they need on defense right now in the middle of it. What you sacrifice in run defense with him, you can make up for in pass coverage. We talked about last week during the bye week, he's far and away the Colts' best linebacker graded in coverage, but I think is their worst in run defense. But, right now you've got 3 linebackers right now who the run defense is their specialty. It's not necessarily going great. It's their specialty, but even worse is their pass defense. You got 3 guys who are all built the same in their strengths and weaknesses, basically. And then you finally get a guy in there who can maybe take some of those snaps and passing down. So huge for both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and I will stipulate or at least add on to what you say. If I had to guess, Josh Downs even getting in a limited practice here on Wednesday is great news for him. We know how he is when it comes to injuries, so I would anticipate him playing on Sunday. The fact that he's practicing at all usually points to him playing. Jaylon Carlies already getting in a full practice on a Wednesday is a really good sign for him. And then when it comes to Ryan Kelly, limited practice is a bit more tricky, so maybe not as optimistic towards him, but still trending in a fairly optimistic way. Talking about the other end of the spectrum now, the less optimistic news, Braden Smith, the starting right tackle, a guy who's been the starting right tackle since 2018, essentially, has been a fringe Pro Bowler multiple times in his career. I know he's dealt with a lot of injuries the last couple seasons, but he's still been a pretty steady force on that right side of the offensive line. Shane Steichen did say that he's still dealing with a personal matter that held him out of the Patriots game 2 weeks ago. and he doesn't know if Braden Smith will return this season. Now, Jake, you can give us a little more insight on this, and just in terms of like what Shane Steichen said today, not in terms of what the personal matter is, because it is personal, and we're not going to weigh in on that. But it does seem kind of unlikely, at least to me as an outsider, that we see Braden Smith again this season.
Yeah, that one's tough. Shane did say like right off the bat that Braden was not going to practice and, doesn't imagine that he would play this week. So it feels like they're giving him all the space that he needs for dealing with whatever this is. And obviously serious enough to where they're allowing this to play out. And if he is able to come back within the season, great. But if not, I think they're giving him his space. Obviously not going to speculate on that. I'm not going to pry and try and figure it out. Whatever it is, if Braden wants to share it, that's on him. But I mean, there is a position to fill there. So for the Colts, luckily Bernhard Raimann returned, a couple weeks ago. So Matt Gonzalez, who was playing pretty good ball. The Colts do have someone that can slide in there at right tackle. It doesn't have to be Blake Freeland. Hoping for the best with whatever's going on with Braden Smith. Obviously a big loss for the Colts for however long he's back. It could be this week, could be the rest of the season. Again, Shane left it totally open. Luckily for the team, they do have, at least one guy who could probably step in and play at a pretty decent level. But nonetheless, Braden Smith has played lights out at big moments throughout his career. Has had 1 or 2 seasons where he allowed like 1 or no sacks. And then obviously people kind of know him for his run blocking. So big hit for the Colts regardless, but everyone will get through it on both sides, just hoping for the best for whatever Braden's going through.
Yeah, again, we don't want to speculate on what's going on there. I just hope everything's okay with him, and hopefully, he can get back to maybe being on the field again, rather like this season or next season or whatever it's going to be. Like, I just hope everything's okay with whatever that is. Typically, when you hear personal matter for an NFL player, it's something you don't want to speculate on, so we won't do that here, but hopefully, hoping for the best when it comes to Braden Smith. We did get 2 more bits of injury updates, though, for this Colts team this week. One, I'll just brush through really quick here. Tanor Bortolini was a full participant. He's returning from a concussion, so he should be cleared out of concussion protocol by the end of this week. And then cornerback JuJu Brents, we got an update on him. It's not as optimistic as Ryan Kelly and Jaylon Carlies. Like, he hasn't been designated to return yet. But, Jake, what can you tell us about JuJu Brents?
Yeah, I mean, initially, like in the summer when he got hurt, a lot of people didn't know. There really was no clear answer on if he was going to return or not. But it certainly sounded more optimistic to me, when hearing from Shane today, that the door is open. He said he's progressing well. There's still no like timetable on it. But, with 4 games left, I think it would be easy for Shane to say, maybe not this year. He would probably be less committal on that, but it sounds like there's at least a little glimmer of hope, especially if they somehow make the playoffs. But yeah, JuJu Brents with his knee injury, we said when he got injured, is that really a guy you want to hurry back anyways? Luckily, they're not like dying at corner, so they could probably ease him back in if at some point in the last couple weeks he is able to come back. But it's kind of news without being news. Like the good thing is he is progressing, and it does sound like there is a possibility that he could come back this season. But yeah, it's not something I'm really holding my breath on, just because they've managed to get through the whole season without him.
Yeah, for sure. And coming up, guys, we're going to talk about the ramifications of all this injury news. Who's starting in place of Braden Smith, what it means to have all these other guys back, what happens if JuJu Brents returns. We're going to talk about all that here coming up in just a second.
Today's episode is sponsored by Built Rewards. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent right now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. A lot of us have been in that boat. You feel like you're just dumping way too much money into something you're not even owning, but Built makes it so that you're at least getting something back when you're paying your rent. You can earn valuable Built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. Redeem points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments. With over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program, the possibilities are endless. Access unique experiences that are all exclusive to Bilt members. Personally, we all love using points for travel or whatever it may be. I think I like the best, you can roll it into your next payment. I mean, just why not get extravagant with it? Make everything cheaper and cheaper for yourself. Bilt makes it so easy to turn rent into rewards. And if you're already paying rent, why not make it worth your while? Start earning points on rent that you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. Make sure to use our code so that they know we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. Okay, Zach. So in the immediate future, I think one of the bigger ones here is Josh Downs. I think that helps the Colts right away. Obviously, we've seen at the small periods of time where they've been without Downs this year, they just don't have an adequate replacement. They do not have anyone that can replicate what Josh Downs does. So Downs coming back and kind of being a security blanket for Anthony or whatever quarterback it is. Because, I mean, even with Joe Flacco, he's getting 7 catches a game. Josh Downs is probably the biggest linchpin of the receiving portion of the passing game,
Yeah.
So him being back could be huge, especially, we'll get to it more in the final segment here. But again, the biggest returns on injuries are guys you just don't have replacements for. And AD Mitchell is a nice player, could be a nice player and has all the potential in the world, but it's not there yet. There's the signs that it could be there, but there's really nobody else on the Colts that does what Josh Downs does. So him coming back, that could absolutely be huge. With Ryan Kelly, we don't really know if he'll be back or not, but it looks like at least Tanor Bortolini might be back, getting that starting spot back. Danny Pinter can go back to being the backup. I thought Pinter played fine and, did a good job last week. But Tanor Bortolini is the guy I think a lot of us think is probably the future at the position. Now, there's a caveat with that because Shane was asked today, when Ryan Kelly comes back, is he the starting center? And yes, he is. I think we can all agree Tanor Bortolini has played pretty well, and that's probably his position for the long term. But Ryan Kelly is the team's starting center whenever he's able to return to the field.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about Josh Downs, though, and then we'll get to more Ryan Kelly stuff from there. But Josh Downs, I think, is arguably the biggest playmaker on this offense, aside from the quarterback position, because obviously Anthony Richardson is a little bit more than a quarterback with what he can do with the ball in his hands. But aside from Anthony Richardson, it has to be Josh Downs. That's the guy you go to when you need a first down. Just helps the Colts' third down offense just immensely. And he's one of the more reliable players in this wide receiver room, in this entire offense even, in a year that's been plagued by drops and inconsistencies with other receivers and tight ends and running backs in the passing game. Josh Downs has been a pretty consistent player in terms of just making things happen when he is targeted. And it's why the Colts, have a pretty positive passing game in the games that he's been active this season. It's why we've seen probably their best passing performance was the Jets game, and they were relying on Josh Downs quite a bit. So I do think getting him back is a massive, massive aspect of this game. We've also seen the games without Josh Downs, the Colts have tried to be more run heavy. They tried to be more 12 personnel. We look at that Patriots game the last time before the bye week, and it was mostly 12 personnel trying to run the ball a ton. And then when they had to do the drop back passing game, aside from that final drive of the game, it wasn't very effective on that Sunday. So I do think getting Josh Downs back allows the Colts to be a little bit more balanced, allows them to funnel the ball to another playmaker, and just gives you another option underneath that helps that short passing game. So, yeah, I mean, look, you don't even need me to talk here to know how important Josh Downs is to this offense. It's just great to get a player like him back in the lineup if he's good to go this weekend. When it comes to Ryan Kelly, we've all been hard on Ryan Kelly at times this season, especially with the emotional led aspect of the Anthony Richardson benching and his comments after the Houston game and stuff. And, we've had our moments with Ryan Kelly for sure, but this is a very tenured player, a former Pro Bowler. And hopefully, the time on IR got him back to being healthy, because look, when he's healthy, and playing his best ball. He's the best center on this team. It all comes down to, does he look better than what he did earlier this season when he had some struggles? But I do think this helps in terms of pass protection with, calling out blitzes, getting another guy out there who can understand what he's seeing and can help with slide protections and stuff like that. So again, getting both these guys out there, guys who are reliable, guys who have a history of production for an offense that has been a bit inconsistent this season, I think can be a big boost. So yeah, it's great having both those guys out there. And I am curious, and this can kind of lead to our next injury update with Tanor Bortolini, is with Ryan Kelly resuming at center, does Tanor Bortolini potentially factor in at right guard? Like, it'll almost certainly be Mark Lewinsky, I think, but I wonder if that is a conversation that's happening, because we did see Bortolini play a little bit of center in the preseason and in the offseason. So if they really want to get the young kids some reps, especially, I mean, this is me just looking ahead too much, but if they lose this game and they're essentially knocked out of the playoffs, maybe those final 3 games you give Bortolini the reps at right guard because he is a young player. But just for this upcoming weekend, even, I do wonder if that's a conversation in-house, or, look, Lewinsky played well this past week. Let's keep it with the veterans out there.
Yeah, that very well could be a possibility. Because, I mean, Glowinski is still on the practice squad. They haven't officially signed him to the active roster yet. He's still very much in the motions of they could call him up a few times. But, I say that now, and maybe Friday or something, they officially bring him up. But no, I mean, that's certainly a possibility. I know they like continuity and everything, and things looked better against the Patriots, but we know Bortolini's going to be around next year, whereas Glowinski probably isn't. So that's certainly something they could look to do. I mean, what is the drop off there? Probably not a ton. I mean, Bortolini at least is going to move better. Glowinski's not playing in between the guys he used to play with anyways. So I don't think there's this thing where it's like, yeah, but he's got that really special connection with Braden Smith or Ryan Kelly. He's not with those guys right now. So you probably don't lose much, and you have a lot more to gain if you put Bortolini out there, just for the sake of comfortability. And, Sperano, I couldn't think of the line coach for a minute, but no, he has that familiarity with Sperano as well. And, he's got Quentin on the other side. They all communicate very well. We don't know what they're going to do. I think the team does like to stick with what's working, though. I don't think they just like to pull the rug out from things. So my guess is that it would still be Glowinski, even though, like you said, it might be more beneficial to get a guy like Bort those reps.
Yeah, and then the other 2 young players we have to talk about, because we just talked about Bortolini, a rookie who still could find his way on the field. The other 2 rookies are Matt Gonsalves and Jaylon Carlies. For Matt Gonsalves, it looks like he's going to be the right tackle the rest of the season. And again, not to sound too team-centered with how I'm approaching the Braden Smith personal issues, because, we have to kind of separate the player from the personnel piece right now. But this is kind of an audition for Matt Gonsalves. He's got 4 more weeks now to really audition to be the right tackle, not only of the future, but of next season. Like, if he comes out and looks really strong in these next 4 games, the Colts have an out in Braden Smith's contract to where they could cut him with 0 dead cap this offseason. So that is a big possibility. And again, I don't want to make light of his personal issues, and I don't know what they are, so I don't want to harp on that too much right now with what's going on, but it is the realistic matter of a business right now, where if Matt Gonsalves plays well these next 4 weeks, that's your guy for next season. So it's a big time for Matt Gonsalves to really show out. He has played very, very well these past 3 games. He's only allowed, I think, 6 pressures in the past 3 weeks, which has been very solid. I think he's like the 14th rated offensive tackle in the NFL in pass block grade, according to Pro Football Focus, these past 3 games. So
one of the top rookies overall.
Yeah, he's played some really good football recently. So it'll be good for him to get more reps and get more experience. And I expect his play to be pretty solid. Some warts, obviously, but I expect it to be fairly solid. And then on defense, Jaylon Carlies being back, you get another potential difference maker on the field. And again, I'm going to be as nice as possible with this, but it gets Grant Stewart off of defense and gets him back to only being special teams, to where he really should be. Grant Stewart, awesome Miami game, really fun player. Please get him off of defense so we have guys who can actually cover out there. Like, I know the other linebackers struggle in coverage, but Grant Stewart just doesn't know where he needs to be in coverage. So let's get Jaylon Carlies out there who has more potential and more ability in coverage and even in the run game as well. So I do think that just getting, Carlies back on the field on defense is an upgrade over Grant Stewart in those base looks. And then Gonsalves, I think, is going to be a solid part of the offensive line the rest of the season.
Yeah. After this game, I think they're going to be seeing a fair amount of base defense, over the next few games with those struggling, probably relatively vanilla offenses that they're going to be going against. You cannot have three, missed tackle prone, run stopping linebackers who can't cover. Carlies has got to get in there and be able to do a little bit. And who knows, maybe he is better at run stopping, over the next few weeks. I mean, I'm not expecting a whole lot. He's going to be out there for coverage. But, I mean, shoot, that's a guy that needs reps because let's not forget he was a safety at Missouri. And, maybe more reps, he gets a little more comfortable and assertive and confident against the run. But regardless, even if he's a detriment against the run, they got to have someone out there in coverage.
Yeah, for sure. And now coming up, guys, we're going to switch our focus more to Colts Broncos, talk about several storylines and some things that stand out to us on film and kind of in the deeper stats when it goes into this upcoming matchup.
Hey, Locked On Colts everydayers. If you're like me and your holiday shopping list is maybe not so complete, then I've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fan in your life. Perhaps you've heard of Ice Shaker. Ice Shaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB, and they'll make the ideal gift. They were kind enough to hook Zach and I up with these. Really good cup. I mean, if you think about it, your wife, your girlfriend, she's got the Stanley. You get the Ice Shaker. I'm not going to lie, I have a Stanley as well. But no, these are really good. I don't get into the whole protein thing, but they do have a built-in agitator that's not super loud. It's really hard plastic. And you just, I imagine, put stuff in there, but it's not noisy. I mean, no one wants to be drawing a bunch of attention to themselves when they're shaking up their protein shakes or whatever. But I mean, I know it's winter, but this thing keeps ice for a really long time as well. I've had it, with ice water in there for it seems like a couple days, and it's done really, really well. It was created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers. Ice Shakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They've changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift you've been looking for. So go to iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% on your order. It's made out of kitchen-grade stainless steel bottles that don't absorb a bunch of odor like the plastic bottles do. I think a lot of us know if you leave a drink or water in there in your cup for too long, it ends up smelling like a creek. I have not encountered that being a problem with this. And they've got third-party testing that makes sure that it's not a problem. Again, they've got the patented twist and agitator that breaks up powders, but it's silent when you shake it instead of the annoying ball. And again, it holds ice for over 30 hours. It's winter now, but I mean, we've got listeners out there in warm climates. And then eventually, even though it's very cold and unreasonable outside now, it will be warm again, everybody. So again, they're customizable. Again, you saw we have the Colts ones. You can send your logo in or check out the custom shop to customize your favorite bottle. Turnaround time on the custom bottles is only 3 to 5 business days. So order your team branded bottles today at iceshaker.com and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off of your order. Ice Shakers. Show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. Ice Shakers. All right, Zach, we're shaking our stuff over to the Broncos matchup. Not going to dive into it too deep because we've got crossover Thursday with me and Sarah Bettinger from Locked On Broncos for Thursday. And then Friday, obviously, you and I always preview the game. But particularly after today, with some of the things we learned with injury updates and some of the stuff we talked to players about, there was really some things that stuck out to me about this matchup. First and foremost is you look at Denver, and, you and I are big on please don't scout teams or players based on the box score. But there are some things that stick out with Denver. They're the top sacking team in the NFL, number 1 with 47 sacks. That is the best thing they do on defense. It's the best thing they do as a team. As an offense, they're kind of middle of the road. They avoid sacks. They get rid of the ball quick. But defensively, they rack up those sacks. Luckily for the Colts, they have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at avoiding those. So what is usually like a huge feather in the cap for the Broncos and an advantage is something the Colts kind of have a counter for. And with that, they also have a big hole at cornerback opposite of Pat Surtain. If a lot of you guys watched that Browns game, you saw Jerry Jeudy went nuclear in his revenge game. I mean, they have a big problem at cornerback that was very, very public on primetime TV. They don't know who that, I mean, the Broncos do, but like even Broncos media really doesn't know who that other corner is going to be opposite of Pat Surtain this week. So if, Anthony is able to avoid sacks like he typically does in this game, and the Colts have Josh Downs back, Alec Pierce does his thing and they don't wait until the fourth quarter to get him involved. That's something that Denver usually has as a huge plus for them that the Colts can kind of flip around.
Yeah, to add some credence to also what you're saying when it comes to the sack avoidance with Anthony Richardson, I believe since his return to the starting lineup, he's only been sacked twice. I think they both came against the Jets defense, and one was obviously that big fumbled sack. The other one was like a broken play, and he just slid down for a sack. But only 2 sacks taken in those 3 weeks. He has a 5% sack rate, or pressure to sack rate. So that means only 5% of his pressures are becoming sacks, which is number 1 in the NFL among quarterbacks in that span. Funny enough, the second best quarterback in the NFL in that span is Bo Nix with like a 6.7% rate. And so I don't expect the Colts defense to get many sacks on that side of the ball. But going back to Anthony Richardson, he's been great at avoiding the sacks and avoiding those negative plays when it comes to sacks. And that will be a big aspect of this game. Can the Broncos defense get him down like they've been able to get down every other quarterback this season, or will he be able to twist and get his way out of every single sack like he usually does? Hopefully the Colts can keep the pressure rate below 48% like they've been averaging since Richardson's return, but we shall see there. I also love the shout out about the backup corner on the outside there, Jake, because we saw when the Colts played against the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions had a backup cornerback starting on the outside. It was Kindle Vildor to start the game, and I think Vildor got benched halfway through the game for a different corner. I think it was like Holmes, I think was his name, or something like that. And the Colts were just attacking that backup corner constantly. And while technically it didn't work out in the box score because the Colts forgot how to not commit penalties on the offensive line in that game, and they had 70-something yards passing taken off the board because of that, it was working. Alec Pierce had a big catch down the side there. I think Kylan Granson had a big catch on the outside out there. I think the Josh Downs catch that was waved off was also against that backup corner. We saw the Ashton Doolin non-catch late in the game was targeting that backup corner. So it was working. It was an effective strategy. And we've seen Anthony Richardson not be shy when it comes to throwing the ball deep against bad corners. I mean, he will just chuck it down there, even if it's not efficient. So I do think that is an opportunity for this Colts offense to be explosive. They have actually struggled quite a bit the last 2 weeks to be explosive. Like, again, statistically, there's been a lot of drops. Anthony Richardson actually has 6 big-time throws, over 20 air yards since returning to the starting lineup, but he only has 3 completions when targeting 20 plus yards down the field. So that shows kind of some of the issues there on these deep passing attempts. So maybe the Colts have a chance to get back to explosive passing football in this next game because the Broncos are more of a single high type defense. They like to play zone from that single high. And Richardson has shown that he will rip the ball down the field against single high defenses that play a lot of zones. So maybe they will target that weaker corner and try to isolate him on vertical routes and throw the ball deep to your Pierces and A.D. Mitchell. If you can come down with it this next time, that'd be awesome. But I do think that is an avenue that the Colts can exploit on Sunday.
And speaking of that zone defense, the Colts have their slot receiver potentially back in Josh Downs, a guy that could be a zone beater, really good on those option routes. Could be huge. Again, something that Denver usually uses to be a huge problem against other opponents. The Colts might have a counter for that. I think Josh Downs, if he's back, that's going to be a huge asset for them. Like it's something where in a must-win game, we may not be able to speak to the value of him being back enough.
Yeah. And I will say something interesting too is, and this kind of goes against
you always say stuff that's interesting.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, Jake. Thank you for that. I need that pick me up there. But the Broncos defense this year has been suffocating when it comes to getting offenses off of their rhythm and lowering their success rate and having them rely on explosive plays. And the Colts offense has been great this season at getting themselves off rhythm and having to rely on their own explosive plays. So the Colts in some ways are kind of built for a defense like this where, look, we're not going to be a high success rate offense regardless. We don't have a short passing game. We don't have much of a running game, but we do have explosive plays, or at least they did early in the season with Anthony Richardson. So in a sense, the Colts offense has been prepared for this type of defense all year long, where it's like, you can get explosive plays on the Broncos defense. You might not be able to get consistent production on first, second, and third down because they are a pretty good defense overall, but you can get those occasional explosives. I think there will be some chances for explosives on Sunday. It's just if the Colts can actually convert on them. Like I kind of alluded to a second ago, the Colts, since Richardson returned to the lineup in week 11, they're 3 of 17, or Richardson's 3 of 17 on passes with intended air yards of over 20 yards down the field, but there have been 3 drops on those throws, and another one, the deep one to Ashton Dulin against the Jets, that probably should have been a drop. So Richardson's actually one of the highest graded deep passers since returning to the lineup, despite only completing whatever the heck 3 of 17 is, like 15% of his passes above 20 yards down the field since returning. So if the Colts can actually convert on those deep passes, there is an opportunity to score on a very good Broncos defense this weekend.
Yeah, and then for the defensive side of the ball, my last quick point I wanted to make. So this is going to be a game where the Colts probably do not get a lot of sacks. Denver's tied for giving up the 3rd fewest, only 19. A couple things that go into that. One, they get rid of the ball quick. That's a Sean Payton staple. But also Bo Nix is really, really good at escaping pressure. You don't always think of him as like a super mobile guy, but he is. I think back to the preseason. We saw Bo Nix in the preseason at Lucas Oil Stadium. Very athletic guy, very good at escaping. So I asked Zaire Franklin today, I was like, with that in mind, like, you're just probably not going to get a bunch of sacks. How do you counter that? And he said the key is kind of just like mixing up and disguising their coverages to force Nix through his reads, basically. In coverage, they've got to buy the defensive line time to get to him. So that is still the goal, to get to him and disrupt a little bit. But there's going to be a huge onus on basically how Gus Bradley calls up the coverages this week and how quickly they can get to the ball when it's thrown. This is not a game they're going to be able to miss a bunch of tackles. Hopefully they can disrupt Nix a little bit, but we've seen this before from the defense. Think of the Bengals game last year. Any game against Trevor Lawrence ever, it's incredibly frustrating when you can't get to the quarterback. There are some ways to get by, but just buckle up because this is probably going to be a game where they don't really get to the quarterback. But that doesn't mean it has to be some sort of beatdown on the defensive side of the ball.
Way to end this show on a very positive note there, Jake. This will probably...
I said it's possible.
Don't worry, guys. We have more positive stuff to talk about before the Colts-Broncos game on Sunday. That's all we have for today. But again, tune into tomorrow for Crossover Thursday. And then Friday, we'll be back with our full official pregame of Colts and Broncos. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Now, for your second listen, go find Locked On NFL with Tyler Rowland and then Tony Wiggins as well for some real NFL talk afterwards. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get that insider scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon for Crossover Thursday.